Welcome to the Philip Wiley Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Philip Wiley.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Philip Wiley Show. I'm excited to have my friend Fletus Poston joining today. So Fletus and I have known each other for several years, and we got to meet each other, what was it, back the 2023 Black Hat? Was that the first time I believe we met in person?
First time in person, yes, sir.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good we finally got to meet. Fletus is one of these people that I really connect with because he likes to help people and he really believes in community. So I'm really excited to have him on to share his story as well as his background and advice. So welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So how's your new year going so far?
As we pre-chanted or bantered about before we started, it's never stopped. I mean, I've hit the ground running. It's hard to believe we're 21 days into the new year and this month is coming to a close. We've had a lot going on, both at the day job and some of the consulting and the community events I've been part of. So ready for a break already.
Oh, I bet. Man, time just goes by fast. Didn't 2024 go fast for you?
Very quickly. It seems like every time I turned around, it was a new month.
Yeah, and it seems like it just gets faster. And I think part of it's with age, or I don't know, maybe some of it's just technology. Things are just you're so preoccupied, time gets by so quickly. I don't know what it is, but I remember years ago when someone says, "What's your 5-year plan?" and you think 5-year plan, that's a long time. But now you blink and 5 years is gone.
Yeah, and to be honest, with the technology, as you already mentioned it, 6 months later, the technology is obsolete or it's evolved. So you can't say you're going to learn it. Tech, it may not be around more than 24,
Yeah, it's crazy
24
now.
months before it changes.
Yeah, and Moore's Law really doesn't count anymore. It's faster than Moore's Law now.
It's much faster now.
Yeah, and then with AI and all that, it's just amazing. So before we kind of get started further in the conversation, why don't you introduce yourself, share your hacker origin story, kind of where you started out to where you are today.
So I got my first cuts in the security world as an IDS handler back in 2006. I had the opportunity at the time. I was going into my undergrad at Appalachian State, and the lecturer at the time put a satellite office. So most people didn't think about satellite offices back in the early 2000s, but we had a satellite office that I was able to cut my teeth on. After that, I did IT for several years before getting back into the cyber. I added security back into my title in 2015 as a security operations engineer supporting the SOC for a major utility here in North Carolina. During that time, grew out that team. We had about 15 engineers when I left them. Now I run the security organization for CrashPlan, or endpoint and now SaaS backup solution. My purview is identity, AppSec, SecDevOps, SecOps, all fall up underneath me today here in my current role.
Yeah, I kind of hear you talk about that. Man, it's just amazing to see how things have changed from everything on-prem to all the cloud stuff. It's just really changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, when I first got into security, I was cutting my teeth on on-prem email security. I spent probably the first 3.5 years just doing email security. And as we still know today, we keep saying email is still one of your largest attack vectors. Most of your attacks start with a simple email, a phishing email, a recon of some type, just to get some details or potential creds, or you just to click on a link so they get a drive-by or a stager to establish their command and control.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how it still is an issue. So what type of soft platform were you using to manage the email security back then?
Yeah, so that was a beast. We had our MX record was on-prem, but we had, at that time it was Cisco IronPort, I believe was the secure email gateway. Then we added some of their AMP features inside of IronPort. Then we put FireEye EXs in between it with a DLP appliance. Later on, we hooked in a tap to do full packet capture. The stack just got convoluted, and that was, as I just walked through, that's 4 layers. And we still saw 1% of our emails get in that were malicious. We dropped probably 90+% of the emails because of that stack, getting rid of spam, marketing, failed attempts that didn't pass LDAP, et cetera. So The stack today is nowhere close to what it needs to be. Now you just host your MX record on an abnormal or Proofpoint or Mimecast. You don't even bring it down and back up.
Yeah,
You're
it's
going to
interesting.
365.
It's kind of interesting how the technology has gotten more complex, but then in some cases, some things are easier compared to what they used to be as far as, having to manually set things up and use all the different solutions, kind of like you mentioned in the stack that you were using there.
And today, if you hear someone who has an on-prem Exchange server, you're trying to figure out what government agency do you partner with that requires you to still be on-prem, because that's the odd now where 5-10 years ago is why are you in the cloud, before 365 really took off in the early 2020s.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing now. At least one of the things with all the cloud stuff, it just kind of help people's disaster recovery and business continuity plans. Because I remember back, I worked for a mortgage company and we did disaster recovery exercises each year. And then setting all that up, you think about, we would go to some place, was like maybe a colo that we use, some data center, take tapes and stuff and see if we could restore for backup. We didn't have any hot locations to switch over to. So it's just kind of amazing the redundancy that we're able to get from cloud now.
So you just mentioned tapes. I'm very curious when this goes out. Like, if anyone even remembers a tape, you probably have had something similar. The sysadmin on Friday backs it up, throws it in the trunk of the car, drives home. Tapes are sitting in the trunk of the car all weekend. They may return them to the office on Monday. And depending on the weather, that tape may or may not exist on Monday. If it got too hot in that car, you wiped it and it was no longer valid. So you didn't have a restore point because that tape sat in the trunk of their car. At that time, those were fully metal cars, very hot. That tape wasn't going to work on Monday.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Fortunately, the company I worked for was kind of a big company. So I think it was like Iron Mountain came by and picked up the tapes every day. They would take all the tapes and put certain copies in there to be sent off site. So it's pretty,
Yeah,
pretty
this is
crazy.
this bad admin didn't think about it, threw it in his briefcase at the time because it was a small server, and took it home with them. And yeah, that didn't get picked up by Iron Mountain or the other carriers that came and move it off to an offsite location for you. So
Yeah,
crazy.
pretty interesting, all the media back then. Because when we were for the mortgage company, we had these big magnetic, or these big discs. They were like giant floppy disks or something they use in these FileNet systems and some of these big systems that would write to CDs, these optical drives and stuff. So it's kind of
Yep.
crazy. And the storage wasn't much to it. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think back to the late 90s and early 2000s, how big some of those drives were and how little data. I mean, we had like a ProLiant 7,000 servers that was probably about the size of a filing cabinet, and it had like several arrays of disks in there, but it was only like a terabyte of space.
I was about to say, you're lucky if it was a terabyte. It's probably several hundred gigs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Now
pretty
you have
crazy.
that on your solid state drive that's in your back pocket, or it's attached to your laptop right now. You have a 4 terabyte drive that's sitting on your desk that's plugged in.
Yeah. It's
Strong.
amazing.
To your
Amazing
point
how
about
we didn't.
Moore's law, yeah, it just keeps getting smaller and
Yeah.
smaller and faster. We got away from optical drives because you probably can attest to this too. You had a degausser, so you took the drive over and you degaussed it, and then you had someone come pick it up. Now you just put a hole in it, or whatever you do to get rid of the solid state drive.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. One of the craziest ways of destroying data was like the CDs. People used to put those in a microwave to destroy CDs.
Yeah, heat back then was not your friend when it came to anything. That's why your data centers were massively cooled, and they're still cooled. But now you have hot and cold racks on your data centers.
Yeah. So as far as like people trying to break into cybersecurity, so what's some advice that you'd have for someone wanting to break into cybersecurity?
This is for those who've seen me around a little bit. If you don't follow me on most of the social platforms, you'll hear the same story. It's mentorship and it's networking. I challenge most people to do reverse mentorship. So have someone ahead of you, someone who's beside you, and someone who's behind you. Gives you the opportunity to learn together. So, for example, of reverse mentorship, we mentioned it already. I have a strong email security background, but you may have a strong CTI background, cyber threat intelligence. So I can learn cyber threat intelligence from you while I teach you the ways of email security. And you can use that to build out your CTI program by getting indicators out of the email headers, et cetera. Finding someone you can cross train. And then when I say having someone beside you, it's nice to have someone who can relate to you. They've been in the ditch with you. They can help you get it out of the ditch. Then the person behind you. It's pouring into that next generation and showing them, hey, here's what I've done. I'm not trying to make a clone of me, but these are steps that will likely keep you out of that ditch. And if you do get in the ditch, these are some tips and tricks to get out of it. So Networking and mentorship is your best way because people can teach you, learn. And then the networking piece, I always challenge my mentees right now is pick 3 to 4 companies that you want to work for. Go ahead and follow them on LinkedIn, their social platforms, connect on their websites, and just watch what the employees talk about. Learn what they're doing. And when job roles come up, you've made a connection. You can reach out to Bob or Sally or Joe and say, hey, I'm interested in this role. It looks like this is a good fit. I've been following you for a while because you've connected with Bob, Sally, or Joe in the past once they've said they've got a new role. And you're doing an internal connection. And if you get the interview, now you can talk like an employee because you've been following the company, you have contacts with some of the employee, you can sound like an employee when you get on the interview because you've been following what they're doing. You've seen that they've released Series B funding or that they've released a new product or they've done something in the community. And then you can speak to their core values. So you're relatable at that point in time is the best way to sound like you're already an employee when you get on those calls.
Interesting. That's great advice. One of the things too, I think when people are reaching out to folks at different organizations that do have openings, is the fact that sometimes these people get referral bonuses. It's, so don't be scared to reach out to them. I think that's a great idea.
The other thing too there, and depending on where you live, there's local meetups. Start attending those meetups even before you break in. If you're in IT or if you're in another role that you're looking to transition, start attending those like happy hours and ISE squared or ISACAs and these other information groups that are in your area and just glean information and get to know people. That's part of that networking. But you're going to hear about job opportunities. You're going to hear about what they're passionate about. And you can ask the water cooler conversations privately. It's not in writing. It's not an email. So it's a very frank conversation where you and I can share stuff on this. But if you find me after this, when I'm at, let's just say, Wow Wow Hacking Fest or DEF CON, we can have a totally different conversation. And I can give you more insider information or more day in the life that I can't put in a recording.
Yeah, that's great advice, and that's good. I'm glad that you're mentioning the in-person stuff because so many people have gotten to all the online platforms. While I think they're an advantage, but some people I think now, and I think it's good to have a mixture. But a lot of people are putting so much into LinkedIn, which it's important, but you definitely need that in person, like you're talking about. So, what's your opinion on some of the different online platforms as far as networking?
Yeah, so you already mentioned LinkedIn. You got to watch it. It's starting to become a little bit more of a social platform versus a business, but I still find value. I still think it's applicable. And then, of course, you've got the Signal groups that you can join, your Discord, your Slacks, your Skull or School, and all these new platforms are popping up and they're community based. They're wanting to build a community. So you join those communities, you get introduced. There's an intro channel, you introduce yourself. You decide what color you are. Are you a red teamer? Are you a blue teamer? Are you a CTI? And then you can get into the right channel inside of those groups. This is in Discord or in Slacks, depending on where you're at. And then you just start learning inside those. You can ask questions. I'll be the first one to tell you those communities save my bacon numerous times. I see something I've never seen before, and instead of Googling it or asking AI, I go to my network. Hey, friends, has anyone seen this indicator? Has anyone dealt with this adversary? Is anyone aware of what they're actually after? What is their true value prop? What are they trying to do? And then I can work backwards and say, okay, they're targeting because of X. Now I can do this. But having that network allows me to have that virtual water cooler that you wouldn't get if you weren't else. And this is also applicable for those team of ones. There's a lot of people who work and they're the only security or the only IT person. These communities help with that too. Hey, I've never deployed this piece of software, but my executive went to a state dinner last night and signed a contract. Now I got to stand it up. Does anyone have any recommendations on how to harden this? How do I secure this? How do I protect this? Because you're not always going to get that, on day one from a a professional service agreement. They're going to tell you how they want you to deploy it because that's their COTS. They're right off the commercial off the shelf platform, not how you should actually do it. Because academia based hardening is different than real world hardening when it comes to putting security controls in place.
Yeah. So, kind of back on, kind of job advice and stuff, since, you're kind of a hiring manager, come from that background, is there any kind of advice, anything you've learned while you've been a hiring manager
Sure.
that you wish you'd known that you could share with others that make getting a job easier?
So this is going to sound probably counterintuitive. Your resume, even though you pour a lot of energy into it, is probably looked at for less than 15 to 30 seconds. So you want to make sure that when you put a resume together, that what's at the top of that page is what you want me to know. So if you've been out of school for a while, or you didn't go to school, but you've done a lot of projects, you want to put that towards the top of your resume. You want to show me you've done a lab or you've volunteered at a conference early on in that resume, because I'm going to spend less than a minute scanning that resume. So you want to get my attention. Another trick, doesn't happen all the time, but put your GitHub or any markdowns or blogs that you have. Because if you can get me to click on that link and go exploring, now you've got my attention more than a minute. Now I'm looking at your markdowns, your codes, your blogs, and I'm learning a little bit more about you because you enticed me to visit your Medium or your GitHub repo, etc. That's another way to get the attention. I'm not saying you should always put it at the top and you should always just try to sell me, but that's the best way to get my attention. What I said I don't agree with is most of the time I get referrals more than I'm looking at resumes. I'm going to my network. Who's looking for work? Who can give me a characteristic? Character, drawing a blank now, reference. And then if it's a really technical role, who's worked with this individual before? What is their aptitude? What do I need to teach them? What do I need to learn? That goes a long way because there's numerous ways of getting in. Simply sharing that resume or having that coffee or going to dinner with someone allows you to get in, and they can introduce you to the hiring manager, to the recruiter, who can get you a phone screen or a Zoom call. Once you get in the door, now it's up to you to keep moving. But I've known several people who got in, done one or two screens. Then HR is like, we don't have a record of this person. Can you have them apply? They never applied. So they don't have to worry about getting kicked out by the automated system who's going to throw their resume out because of formatting or not passing the score because they didn't take time to tailor their resume to fit the keywords that was in the job description. So on that note, make sure that you do tailor your resume to meet the terminologies that a financial institution is going to use or retail is going to use. Because if they're using automated systems, the ATS, it's going to score your resume. And if the larger the company, the less likely it's going to be seen by a human if it gets screened. Smaller companies, such as myself, I work for a very small company. I ask all the resumes to be sent to me. I can look at every single one of them because, for example, Philip may say, hey, I'm going to send Tony over to you. So I'm watching for Tony to apply. If Tony gets kicked out, I still go ask for Tony's resume because I was told to look for Tony's resume.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Couple, some of the points you mentioned, it goes back to the networking piece. And one of the things I always tell folks that when I'm talking about networking is when you go to these in-person events, make sure you go up, introduce yourself, let people know what you're interested in. Because one of the things I've done here locally is had recent college grads or someone new to the industry that I'd met them because back when I was teaching at Dallas College, I would have people coming up to me all the time looking for junior pen testers. And I not only took in consideration my students, also took in consideration people I knew from the community. And one instance was a young college grad that wanted to be a pen tester, saw him at the Dallas Hacker Association meetups, the DEF CON group meetings in OWASP, and kind of knew his skill set and what he was interested in. And so I was able to help him get a job. And so, yeah, it goes back to letting people know what you're doing and not just being quiet and just sitting in a room, taking advantage of those situations.
Yeah, another thing you just mentioned there that, again, I tell students, entry level, whatever, submit a talk, be part of a panel, let people get to know you. Several people I've mentored, including myself, have been approached. Would you like a job? Would you be interested in working for us after giving a talk or attending and volunteering? Because when you're a volunteer, they can see your work ethic, they can see your customer service skills, they can see your attitude, your persona. That all is observable skills when you're volunteering that no, you don't know who's watching. When you give a talk, they get to see your technical depth, they get to see your communication skills again, your public speaking, how you handle pressure, especially if there's an AV issue during your thing or your slides go away. Can you continue to speak? Are you crutching? Volunteering, attending the local meetups, and then asking to speak at them. And it doesn't have to be a very technical speech. It could be on soft skills. It could be anything you want to break in. Like for the purpose of this podcast today, we're not talking tech for the most part. We're talking about how to make yourself approachable because it comes down to another topic I like to speak on is the human centric side of security. Like it starts with us as people. Security starts from the time you wake up to the time you put your head on the pillow. We are inundated with emails, texts, and notifications all day long before we get to work, while we're at work, and after we leave work. So security is nonstop today. So being aware of that is helpful too, to make you more marketable, because you can say, I know how to screen my text. I know how to screen my emails. I know, for a better note, I know when to open my front door. I know not to touch the stove. Like, these are basic things that are intuitions that either you were taught, you learned by the hard knocks, you burnt yourself, you got robbed, you had your identity stolen, or someone taught you, like either formally or through on the job training or networking, taught you those skill sets. Those are all valuable.
And so, kind of on similar note, what is your opinion on soft skills? I know it's something that people overlook. A lot of times, there are opportunities when people go to the traditional route and go through a college and don't take those kind of courses seriously, but definitely something important. So, what are your thoughts on soft skills?
So I gave a talk on this a little while back. It's like the transition from IT to blue team. And it starts with those. Your soft skills are some of the first things I'm looking at. Are you curious? Are you a critical thinker? Another one, can you laugh? Do you have humor? I'm not saying you need to be a jokester, but do you know how to make light of a situation or have fun and be able to laugh and not be serious? So a lot of this stuff can't be taught. Can you coach someone to be curious? Yes, but they have to try too hard. Can you coach someone to collaborate? Yes. Working through collaboration, being curious, being a critical thinker, just being genuine. Genuine goes a long way. Like, be concise. Like, these are all terms that, like, you hear about if you're an English major or a PR or a journalist. They apply to our field. And I know you can relate. A lot of our field is communications. It's either written or oral. Like, we're writing reports or we're giving presentations to somewhere, to a peer, to a leader, to a senior leader, to a board member, and in some cases, a three-letter agency or a government official, depending on what industry you're in and what report you're asked to produce. So being comfortable writing and speaking is imperative, no matter if you're a pen tester, a GRC analyst, or a SOC analyst.
So what are your thoughts on how to select a career path in cybersecurity?
So I like to use the city analogy. I would try a few different ways. So many times we'll use the analogy. You always hear people, you should start with a SOC. You should start in a SOC, you need to start at the help desk. It's not always true, but a help desk analyst gets to learn the business real quickly, because when you're taking ingest from internal or external, you're learning what applications they use, what are the common pitfalls, what are the technical controls that are in place. So you learn a lot from that role. So the city mindset is start with a low level entry level, be the janitor. I'm not saying you physically need to be the janitor, but find an entry level role that allows you to learn what the city works like. Then move up, become like an officer, so you're protecting yourself. Then become like the mayor. Ultimately, you're working your way up, depending on if you want to be a leader of people or a leader of process. You have opportunities to go into an architecture based role or into a people leader. Your skills are applicable all the way through. So cutting your teeth with ones and zeros, looking at packet captures, writing code, those are all entry level places. But as you move up, now you know what to do with that packet capture, what to do with that Python script, or what to do with the intel that you got from a three-letter agency or your threat intel platform. It builds on itself. So each role, I alluded to a little bit ago, I worked for a utility, I did IT for several years. When I did IT, I did a rotational program. So I started doing IT service management. I got to learn all of my executives because I ran the change advisory board. So as a young 20-something-year-old, I'm sitting in front of my executives every week doing the change advisory board. After that, I did web application monitoring. So I got to learn all of our critical apps because I was monitoring them for their uptime, downtime, and availability. After that, I did electronic document management. I got to know about all the different types of lines of businesses and what documents are important to them and why it's critical to the business. So I was mining the business and learning what is important. So when I transitioned into security, I knew when I had legal on the phone what their pain points were. I knew when I had the generation team on, this is what their pain point. Even better, when I had an event or service disruption, I knew what the app IT teams were dealing with because I could relate, or the governance teams because I'd done some governance based work. So when I got on these events, I could speak their language. So my opportunity and my advice to people is just rotate, dabble until you know. Some people know right away, I'm going to be a pen tester, but you might be a great GRC analyst, maybe, or you might be a good blue teamer because you've got that red mindset. You're going to go do purple team work. So start in the blue, build the defense, and then eventually get back into your roots if you really enjoy red or pen testing and be a purple team member. There's opportunities just to take everything you learn. And then finally, I've mentioned it 3 times now, GRC is important. Without our governance, risk, and compliance teammates, we have no authority to stop a user. We have no authority to say we need a control because we don't have ISO or SOC 2 or GDPR, et cetera, in place. Your GRC team is valuable because they set those policies and procedures to allow you to do your job and to enforce the components of your job. So thank you to your GRC folks out there who are listening, because without them, we wouldn't have a red team or a blue team.
Yeah, some good points. And that's one of those areas that people really overlook when looking at careers is GRC. But one of the things the same along the lines is just keeping on the career topic. What about folks that have been in it for a while and they're trying to advance in their career? What are some options for someone? Because a lot of times people think about management, but there's other options. What are your thoughts?
Again, this is where it gets tricky, because what happens when you've been in a role for a long time? You get seniority. You've probably also got a decent paycheck at that point in time. Sometimes it's hard to do a lateral movement because your company will see you as overqualified or someone that can't be lost because you're critical to the team because you've been the SME for the last 10 years. Be careful when you stay in a role for a long period of time. I'm not saying you have to hop, but try to change your role, even if it's inside the same job title, every couple years. It allows you to easily move around internal to that company, but also makes you marketable when you decide to leave that company. That's the new generation. Most people are not lifers. It used to be 15, 20 years ago, you worked at a company for 40 years and you retired with a pension. That just doesn't happen anymore. To your point, take those soft skills that we talked about, take the technical aptitude and apply it to a role that's very similar. So, for example, the GRC analyst can take all their roles and then maybe move into the SOC or your business continuity team as their incident manager who's doing all their documentation, could be the scribe. Now they can manage all this. They can come in and help write policies because they've been doing it at the GRC level. Now they can move into a technical team as like a PM, as a project manager for the work, or as a scribe. I'm thinking of it depending on the size of your org. You may have enough events that you need a dedicated person who's note taking. From the first time that alert comes in, they could transition into that. For the SOC analyst, they may want to go into architecture afterwards. You could be a security architect. You want to go and design the systems that you've been protecting because now you understand what a SIEM, a SOAR, an EDR, an MDR, XDR, all these buzzwords that we talk about. How do you build that end-to-end enterprise architecture? Be the enterprise security architect for an organization and help build the design. Cloud is another one. If you've been an on-prem person, learning the cloud is imperative because more and more people have moved away. We bantered about it the first part of this call. There's not a whole lot of on-prem applications anymore, unless you're in a large regulated space that requires it to still be in brick and mortar. So that's another opportunity is to go learn the cloud, go secure the cloud, and be a cloud engineer or a cloud SecOps engineer or a DevSecOps. Like a pen tester can easily move into a DevOps role because they've likely been developing tools to do their pen tests for years. So they could move into a DevOps role or an application security role that's more than just pen testing. Now you're actually doing AppSec, where you're actually evaluating the risk profile of putting a vendor in, putting a piece of code in, and you're doing all these scans with Burp, Bloodhound, and whatever other tool you want to use that are also used for pen testing. But now you're using it from a defensive point of view.
Yeah, that's some interesting things you bring up because one of the things I noticed people moving into different careers because even for red teaming or pen testing, someone may love that area, but there may be roles that pays better. And you kind of, after you've been there for a while, it's kind of hard to progress. And kind of to talk to some of the points you mentioned too about not everyone being a lifer, not only are people, a lot of cases, maybe not choosing that, but the opportunity to do that is pretty rare. You see some of these companies that people, the companies get bought out or they're close to retirement and something happens, they lose their job. That kind of happened with some people I've known where they were close to retirement age and the company just kind of let them go early. So it's kind of hard to find that nowadays.
Very tricky, to be honest with you. Like, we'll talk about that string a little bit. Those discriminations are never widely talked about, but they happen. If you've been with a company for a long time, sometimes you're expendable. I can go hire 2 people for your salary, or 3 people for your salary, and I can cross train them and they can be developed up. So again, at the end of the day, we all say it's a family. They all say they have your back, but at the end of the day, it's a business. They're going to do what's best for them and what's best for the company. So not saying that you shouldn't take your job seriously, but realize you have friends and family. So to pause in your job and reflect, is this something that I need to do for 40 years? Or is there a better opportunity that's going to give me a better work-life balance so I can attend my daughter's dance recitals? I can take my wife on vacations or your partner on vacations. I can have my weekends back. Like there are many jobs in our field where you get stuck working 6 or 7 days a week. And if you do it for more than 4 or 5 weeks, it becomes the norm. And then they start expecting it. Like, why are you taking the day off? Why are you not working on Saturday? Everyone else is in the office or online. So pay attention to those cultural things when you're transitioning. Find out what is their work hours? What is the likelihood of overtime? How often does your peers miss family events or holidays? Yes, we work in a fast paced field. It's going to happen from time to time. But if it's a norm, be cautious about the norm unless you're early in your career and you're willing to do that. But you will burn yourself out working 80+ hour weeks for more than a few months.
Well, we're getting down towards the end of this episode. Is there anything you'd like to mention or discuss before we close it out?
Just to reiterate again, find someone in the community, make connections, stay in contact with them, and establish healthy habits outside of it. I was just alluding to it with my last comment. Walk away from the keyboard. Go out and do something. It doesn't have to be physical. If you're a bike rider, go for a long bike ride. If you're a walker, go for a hike. It could just be you go use your hands with woodworking, or you can go cross stitch, or you can go do something that's not your keyboard. It's rejuvenating and allows you to come back and attack the world that we live in much fresher when you spend some time away from the computer. I know many of you saying, Fletus, I can't do that. This is my hobby. I like to do CTFs all night. I like to go in and write new programs every weekend. That's my hobby. Well, you got to do something off of the keyboard eventually. And it's good for your health. It's good for longevity. Because I can tell you now, if you sit here, your hips get wide and you get very old real quick and you start to feel very out of shape when you start to do those physical activities because you're no longer flexible. You're no longer active and you get short breath and you're just so take time for your personal health. Make sure that you do something that's not just typing away on a keyboard.
That's great advice because, one of the things too is people don't take those breaks. You may love it now, but you may get to where you hate it. I know someone that works on the offensive side, and every day after work, they used to go home and spend like 8 hours hacking away on stuff, doing CTFs, found CVEs and stuff. And now their interest has changed. So now they don't even touch the computer when they go home. They're doing woodworking stuff with. There's nothing wrong with that, and gardening and stuff. Just totally got away from it. But just kind of reiterate, you don't want to burn yourself out. You don't want to get to where you hate it. And then also the health thing, that was a really good point there, because one of the things I can tell you, since I'm being an older person, it is harder to get back in shape when you get out of shape. So good points, like you said. And it seems like the stepping away sometimes. And when I think back to my experience with the OSCP in the exam, you would sit there pounding your head, couldn't think of something. But if you took a break and got away from it for a while, you were able to think more clearly and come back and succeed. So that's something for a little food for thought for people out there.
One other thing too that people don't think about, it's okay to try this field and not stay. We're not going to think badly of you if you come in and work in the field for 5 years and decide you want to go back to finance or you want to go back to another job. That's part of the exploratory piece. There's people who try cyber and it's just not for them. And it's okay. Recognizing that early on. So to your point, you don't do it for 20 years and be like, I could have done something else that would have been much more fulfilling. I should have opened that restaurant. I should have been a chef. Yes, it would have been long hours. Yes, I probably would have made less, but that would have been more rewarding. So it's okay. I know we talked about transitioning to the field. It's also okay to transition out of the field. And that's where your community comes involved, who can help you as you transition out, because you can speak to the field, what the value you got when you were in it and the value you got outside of it.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And actually something no one has ever shared on here, but that is a good point. You can transition out. I mean, it's not for everyone. And sometimes it can get stressful, and at the end of the day, why force something if it gets to where it's not enjoyable?
Yeah, we live once. I mean, as just you've already alluded to, like as you get older, your quality of life is important. If this is taking away from the quality of your life and you can't enjoy, I'm going to call it retirement. I don't think anyone in this field ever retires. We keep dabbling until we go away. We may not work 9 to 5, but we will dabble. Then this is probably not the place for you. And I'm not saying that negatively. Just find something that you find passion. So another piece of advice I give people is, how do you feel Sunday night? Are you regretting Monday morning? Or are you still excited for Monday morning? If enough of your Sunday nights are regretting Monday morning, you likely need to change. Either change jobs, change companies, or even change your profession, because Mondays shouldn't be dreadful every week.
Yeah, I agree. That's some good advice. Well, appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join me. It's good to chat with you, and I look forward to when we get together again in person sometime.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to The Philip Wiley Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Philip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Philip Wiley. Until next time.